the lovely Dr. Corrie on. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Do I want to introduce myself?
Yeah, I think you should.
Oh goodness. What should I? Look, I started out as a serial entrepreneur. Then I've exited a number of companies, and I've been bankrupt a couple of times. I've been married twice. I've got 5 kids. I've lived on 3 different continents. I've done consulting and strategy work for Microsoft, the United Nations, World Bank, and now I'm a Tier 1 executive coach, and I work with some of the highest level leaders in the region.
I don't even know how I'm going to break down this. I feel like I need 10 hours of a podcast to
honestly,
break this down.
Stalk me on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is where you'll see everything. But the biggest comment I get about my LinkedIn page isn't why I've done all the things that I've done, but how I've done it.
Okay.
Yeah, because there's a lot. I've published a lot of books. I've completed a lot of postgraduate degrees, and I just keep running.
Okay, for the listeners, I want to get back down to the nitty-gritty of where did life even start? How was your childhood?
My childhood?
Yeah, and where did everything begin?
All the way back.
I want to go all the way back.
I was born at a very early age in Calgary because I wanted to be close to my mom. And I spent about a year and a half there, then moved to Didsbury, Prince George, Northern Canada. I was raised in like minus 25 degrees Celsius. Then we moved to Ottawa for 5 years, then Vancouver. I graduated from high school there. At the age of 23, then moved to Estonia and started my entrepreneurial career. But my childhood was actually really quite good. My parents are amazing, loving people. I was raised in a very traditional Christian home. So I got a really great upbringing, actually. I think that's why I'm so well-rounded and confident.
Brilliant. So moving around at such a young age as well, moving different places, how do you think that impacted you to potentially maybe move abroad or move to Dubai? How do you think?
I'm very good with different environments, and it's not just different environments. Like I seek out really weird environments. I lived 8 years of my life in Estonia. This was post-Soviet, pre-technocrat, so like 1998.
Wow.
And started my first 5 companies there. And so that, I mean, my childhood, obviously, you have to just keep making friends every couple of years. So the ability to move from one place to another and find friends is, part of my worldview. After Estonia, we moved to Yemen. I was living in Yemen for 5 years. And again, learning another language, making new friends, adjusting to a very, very different kind of worldview and very different kind of environment.
What kind of environment is that? Like, can you paint a picture of how that would look?
Yemen, it was fantastic, absolutely fantastic.
What was so fantastic about it?
Well, it's like going back in time. We didn't have running water or electricity most of the time, so we'd have to store water. We had to store about 40 to 50 days worth of water.
Do you know what? I'm just saying, you just said it was so fantastic and one of the most essential things.
Yeah. So I've lived in Estonia. When I first started in entrepreneurship, there were no VCs, there were no incubators, no accelerators, nothing like that. It was you in the street and a good idea, and that's it. And so it was like old school entrepreneur. I think I spent the first year starving. My first wife and I, we ended up being malnourished after about 9 to 10 months there because we couldn't afford meat. Just everything we did, we just poured right back into the organization to try to keep it afloat. It was a long time. My wife ended up becoming anemic as a result of that. So entrepreneurs today don't really have to deal with that anymore, especially not in Estonia. Estonia has an amazing ecosystem for entrepreneurial work. But
I feel like you just skipped a couple of chapters there of what actually happened. What company was this?
My first company was in education.
Okay.
So I started a third-party education company, and I got the EU to pay me to provide third-party education in Estonian high schools. So the Ministry of Education would book out the school, I would go in and rent it, and then I would charge it all to the EU, and it was very good. So I was actually known as the sex guy in Estonia for like 8 years on the street. I was like, hey, you're the sex guy. I'm like, yeah, because I wrote their sex ed curriculum.
Oh
and
my God.
Yeah, and I ended up doing their first teaching, and then I taught the teachers how to teach it, and that was my first.
So the bees and birds talk. How did that look?
Yeah. It was fun. Look, it was a lot of fun. I got to mess with their heads a little bit. It was really great. And actually, that's what got me into strategy work, was the results of that. We did really good work with data stewardship even early on in that program to try to figure out whether or not it was actually making a difference. Because at that time, HIV and AIDS was becoming endemic with the teenage Estonian population. So we were trying to curb that. That got the attention of the World Bank. And so I think I was 26, maybe 27, when they called and said, hey, listen, can you come and teach us how to do that?
How important is sex education now? I know we're after jumping straight into the deep end.
I don't know. Like with the advent of the internet, I think sex education is, well, I'm not going to say it's ubiquitous because everybody can access everything online. But I think it's just as important now as it used to be. But I think it's more important than ever that parents do it. And I think it's more important than ever that parents do it at an age that's earlier than they're comfortable with. I'm talking like between 8 and 10.
As in to educate the children?
That's correct, yeah. Yeah, look, your kids are going to find the information anyway.
Yeah,
they might as well find it. Yeah, they might as well find it under a filter that you've built.
Ooh, that's a really good point to add.
Yeah.
Okay, so what kind of got you into entrepreneurship? What was the itch that you wanted to scratch?
No, actually, okay. Well, the interesting thing was it was my dad. I was having a conversation with him in the yard. We were just having a beer after work one day. I was 22 at the time. And he said, you know, I've been 25 years in this company, in his company, Telecom Canada, and he was really proud of his work. And I said, oh, congratulations. He goes, you know, sometimes I'm not sure if I've wasted half of my life or not. And I was like, oh my goodness. He said, no, listen, I'm happy where I am. I'm going to stick it out. I'll retire early, and it's going to be a good career. But you know, if you want to do something crazy with your life, you should do it while you're young and you have time to clean up the mess. And I thought, wow, that's really good advice. So I went home and I told my wife, well, my dad said that, we should just move to the other side of the world and do something. Because we had both, my wife and I, we had really good jobs. I could see where the end of our path was. It was a single family dwelling in a suburb of Vancouver somewhere, 2.5 kids, a dog, a white picket fence, soccer on the weekends. Like, that's not actually the life that I want to live. I want to kind of throw a wrench into everything for a little bit and see what happens. And so we ended up selling everything and moving to Estonia and using all of what we had to try and get these companies off the ground. And every time I needed something that wasn't in the market, I would just create a company to provide it for me.
So to bring you back to the deep despairs of having no money and becoming anemic and everything else as well, how did you feel during that stage? Like, did you feel like motivated to get yourself out of the shit? Or?
Yeah, look, for me it was a calling, right? And look, Vancouver, upper middle class Vancouver was my plan B, right? So if this all actually falls apart, I can run home with my tail between my legs and still end up in Canada, and that's not a bad thing. So I think I had that as a safety net.
The beauty of having a safety net.
Yeah, I think that was,
it allows you to make mistakes.
No, I had way too much pride to ever move back into my parents' house. That probably would not happen. But I had no illusion that I would be, starving and living under a bridge at any point in my life. So having a few months of hardship, like real poverty, was actually just a learning and stretching experience. It was, I'm not going to say it was fun, but it was valuable.
So this kind of, you could say, careless, reckless behavior of just trying everything, where did this come from? Besides your father just saying make mistakes?
Honestly, it's my primary value is curiosity. I have 5 core values, and the strongest of the 5, by far, by a mile, is curiosity. I've been intensely curious my entire life. I take things apart and then put them back together, but in new ways. I think I was like 10 when I built a radio-controlled light bulb because I didn't want to. Anyway, I'm curious. I'm curious about stuff, and I follow my curiosity into a lot of things. Like the number of books I've published is nothing compared to the number of books I've started to write, and that's not anything compared to the number of books I've read. So my curiosity, I follow into a lot of different things, and every once in a while, something grabs my curiosity so tightly that I complete a PhD, or I write a book, or start a company, or something like that. It ends up being a big curiosity. But curiosity has driven almost everything that I've done.
Does your curiosity enable you from being productive at times?
It's funny you should ask that. I was diagnosed only a few years ago with ADHD, and it never occurred to me that might be a thing, because honestly, when I was young, it never was a thing. But I
The
can
guy
see
I
how
spoke
that,
to yesterday sat in
Yes.
your same chair, said the
Yeah.
same thing.
It was not a thing when I was young. And then one of my friends, we were talking about all of my books. I'm publishing a book every year now. Actually, this year I'll be publishing 2 because, I'm not satisfied with my own pace, and I'm curious about multiple things at the same time. So we were talking about that, and he goes, how many books have you started writing? And I said, I've probably got 24 that I've actually started the manuscript for. And he said, do you have ADHD? And I said, no, I don't think so. And he says, well, tell me about this and this and this. And I was like, okay. Anyway, so then I went just out of curiosity to go and get the test done. And I was reading through the test, and it compares the way you behave in childhood to the way you behave now, and your coping mechanisms then to your coping mechanisms now. It took about an hour and a half to do the test. But about a third of the way through it, I realized, these questions were actually made for me. And maybe that's why I wrote poetry on my, grade 12 provincial math exam, because I didn't care about the exam. I didn't care about this, or, I only followed things that I was really passionate about, and there were a lot of them. Now, lucky enough, in my 20s, I learned how to focus that. And so there's some sort of superpower that we have that's called hyperfocus, apparently. I've done some reading in that, and I've done a lot of work on flow and the neurology of flow, and now I'm a board-certified neuroplastician because of my studies in flow and how it works in coaching. But yeah, I think...
Okay, can you break that down then, flow? If someone
Flow.
was, if someone's suffering from ADHD, what kind of strategy would you put in place for them? You
have to be in an environment where there's a sufficient amount of chaos. So what actually happens in flow is that your prefrontal cortex shuts down, right? It closes off. And that's where your sense of time, your sense of self, your sense of free will, all your narratives, I'm too young, too old, too smart, too stupid, too fat, too thin, too young, too female, right? Whatever. All of those narratives, they're up here. Well, they shut down when you're in flow. And in order for that to happen, you have to distract your reticular activation system. So the RAS is like the secretary that decides what should be brought to the attention of the CEO. You're the CEO. But the CEO can take a nap in the middle of the afternoon if the RAS is sufficiently distracted. And the way you distract the RAS is by having a certain amount of visual or auditory chaos around. So what happened to me was I would sit down in a cafe, usually a Starbucks, and I wrote almost my entire first master's program from a single Starbucks. I'd just sit down and I'd put my computer up and put my books on one side and a venti drip coffee on the other side like this, and then I'd start to work. And then I would reach out to grab my coffee and notice that it was cold. And I would take a sip and be, I'm so disappointed, my coffee is cold. And I'd look at my watch and 3 hours had gone by. Now, I remembered everything that I had read, but I had no memory of reading it. And I remembered everything that I had written. I could see it right there. Oh yeah, I wrote that. But I had no memory of writing it, because it was all done in a flow state where all of the calculations are done in the back of your head, where you're conscious but not aware. This is what happens when you drive home, or you drive a familiar route from home to work, and then you pull into the driveway and you have no memory of driving, and you think, oh my goodness, am I going insane? You're not going insane, you're in flow. Your brain you've earned the right to process all of that information in the back matter of your head and send the CEO out to lunch.
Where did you go to get tested? I need to get tested.
But honestly, I thought there was something wrong with me mentally. As it turns out, there is something wrong with me mentally, or maybe whatever. But my first wife, she would complain all the time. I would have my laptop open and I'd be sitting there, and she would stand in front of me for a full minute, just snapping her finger, Corrie, 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 Corrie. And then she would say, when I looked at her finally and made eye contact, she'd say it would still take another like 20 seconds for my soul to re-embody my eyes. And then she'd say, okay, good, you're here now. The kids are screaming, can you not hear this? I need your help. And I'm like, right, okay. So stand up from the table and start moving around. But because there was enough chaos in the room, that allowed my RAS to be distracted enough that I could slip into a flow state and work in the middle of that chaos. But I really thought there was something wrong with me until I had read Flow, the book by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, wherein I thought, oh wow, maybe that's what's actually happening. So then I studied how to get better at it, and now I have to set alarms to break me out of flow. Yeah. Because I slip into it so quickly, and I'm so efficient when I'm in there that if I don't set an alarm, I will miss every meeting.
That's incredible, because I feel like people are using ADHD as a excuse and not their superpower.
Correct. Yeah, there is definitely a way for us to use flow as ADHD as an enhancer for what we do, because it is difficult for me in my head to sort through all of the available information all the time. It's a lot. I don't know if you've ever.
I'm wearing multiple hats at the moment.
Yeah. So it's like that. It's like that all the time. I remember the first time I took medication for it. I took Adderall.
Oh, so have you taken medication?
Yeah.
So
it's amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing. But I started recreationally, like on the illicit market.
Okay.
Yeah. One of my friends was like, "Oh, you got to try this. It's Adderall. It's cool. It'll help you focus." Anyways, I was like, "Oh, cool. It's fun." So it was like this guy from Miami, a really close friend of mine. I just took 30 milligrams of Adderall from him and popped it for fun. And then I was like, is this what it's like to have one thought at once? That's compelling. So I don't use it every day. I'm on Concerta. So I've been diagnosed here. I have my prescriptions here. I see my psychiatrist every month. Not a lot of people know about that, but yeah, I'm on Concerta. Not every day. I try not to take it more than 4 or 5 days at a time.
What's the side effects of that?
The side effects of Concerta?
Yeah.
You get really, really thirsty.
No, not. If you're listening, he's drinking water.
Yeah. That's right. So you get really, really thirsty, and if I don't exercise, then sometimes I'll have trouble sleeping. So on days when I take Concerta, I have to go to the gym. I have to work really, really hard, because otherwise the melatonin serotonin cycle gets thrown off. And if I take it too late in the day, then that throws off my sleep cycle as well. So I try to take it before 7 a.m.
You seem to have such an overactive brain in general without taking absolutely anything. Do you find it difficult to fall asleep?
No, I don't actually. One of the reasons is because I've developed an amazing process for emptying my PFC. Your prefrontal cortex is the reason why you can't sleep. That and the melatonin serotonin cycle.
Yeah.
So if your PFC is full of things, narratives, emails you should have written, the thing you should have said to your boss but didn't say, the thing you wish you'd said to your ex-girlfriend but you didn't say, like all of those things are rolling around in your head. Things you should have bought from Amazon but didn't click the buy button on, those things that you have to be able to dump those out. You have to give your PFC permission to forget about them.
And how do you do that?
You write them down. I have boards. I live my life through Kanban boards. And this is going to be part of my book this year, Undistractable, is how to manage your life through Kanban boards. I have a series of them. I have a list of lists. It's lists of places I want to see before I die, movies I'd like to rewatch or watch for the first time, books I want to write, books I want to read, courses I want to produce, courses I'd like to take, degrees I think I might be interested in when I'm older. Gift ideas for my wife is a list. And I steward all of that information on a Kanban board so that whenever I get something rolling around in my PFC, I know I can only take 7 pieces. That's it. You can have 7 pieces of information in your PFC before it becomes overwhelmed. So that's like 7 items on a grocery list or 7 things to do. After that, you're done. None of our ancestors prepared us for the complexity of today.
Yeah.
Right? Like we've got 10,000 generations of exceptional survival and adaptation, but none of our ancestors dealt with more than 7 things at a time. They lived very simple lives. Right? So we're not evolved to handle that. So if we don't get those things out of our brains, then they'll just continue to rattle around and they'll keep us awake and they'll keep us distracted and then they'll produce cortisol and adrenaline and it'll make it worse for us.
Okay, on the subject of AI then.
On what?
On the subject of AI, I want to ask you a question.
Go on.
Are you afraid of artificial intelligence?
No, of course not. We've had artificial intelligence since the computer. Right?
But are you afraid of the future of artificial intelligence
I'm really not.
overtaking us? Because they say, I think it's Albert Einstein has the points or IQ level of 160, and now I think AI is at 155 already. Yeah. So
I'm not worried. I don't look. It's possible, but I think that we'll be able to put safeguards in place that should be in place before it becomes probable. That AI could be damaging for us. We did the same thing with nuclear power, right? You can use it for good or evil. You really can. And yes, we used it a couple of times for evil. It was really horrible. And we made a couple of mistakes with nuclear power, like Chernobyl. It was a mistake. It was an error, right? Human error. So human error has led to the abuses of these kinds of tools, but we've survived them, and I think we'll be fine. I'm very hopeful about the human race.
How do you think society is dealing with AI and being fearful of losing their jobs?
Look, we've had this since the arguments over bank tellers and the ATM, right? In the 80s, when they invented the ATM, there was this huge backlash about, bank tellers are going to lose their jobs and they should unionize. And now there's more bank tellers hired, physical human bank tellers hired today than there were then, because the banking industry has grown and exceeded the growth or the replacement ratio of the ATMs. So even though we have ATMs, we still have more bank tellers, and we have now people to service the ATMs and to create the ATMs and to install them and maintain them, and we have all these other ATM-related industries that have developed on the side of that. I wouldn't be worried too much about having your job replaced by artificial intelligence. I would say, though, that even though AI is probably not going to disrupt your industry anytime soon, those companies in your industry that are using AI will disrupt those that don't. And whatever your job role is, those people in your job role who learn to use AI to augment their decision-making and their execution will disrupt those that don't. So you should make it your friend sooner than later.
Yeah. I think it's really important to be agile and to be able to change the way you work as well, because of the fast-paced environment that we're in. How important are people in the workplace?
How important are people? People are the workplace. None of your companies actually exist, right? What is your company? Your company is nothing. It doesn't actually exist. It's not there. The company is it's a blend of, let's say, 1,000 families, each of which has decided to send a representative every day to play an economic game. So it's the oil and gas game, or the luxury shoes game, or the property game, whatever. You're playing an economic game, and if you play the game well, your team wins money, and the more money your team wins, the more people you can put on your team, and the better those people live, the higher quality of lives they live. And this is not very different than the way that we've been doing it for 250,000 years. We join a tribe, we add value to the tribe in exchange for a share of the resources. If everybody was a hunter, then who's going to do agriculture? Who's going to do nurturing? Who's going to do education? So the beginning of the division of labor was actually, 250,000 years ago. This is just a new form of the same basic, very
just
old
updated.
millionaire. Yeah, it's an updated form of old technology. What's different now is that you don't have to add value to the tribe you're born into, right? A geographical tribe, a familial tribe, a linguistic or a religious tribe. You can actually exit all of those things, learn a new language, live in a new city, choose a new kind of economy, and you can add value to the world in exchange for a share of the resources by doing anything, right? Really, there's tens of thousands of ways to add value now. So you're not stuck in any one tribe. You can move from tribe to tribe, add value in different ways. It's actually just a very, very dynamic, new form of a very old truth.
So you've moved from lots of different companies. Have you ever felt like you've kind of shed an identity each time you've moved?
Shed, no. Gained, yeah, probably.
Okay,
Yeah, so it's like I collect competencies. As a curiosity-driven kid, and still now as a curiosity-driven adult, I collect competencies. I like to learn how to get good at things. I get curious about something, and then I learn how to get good at it, and then I add that to my list of things, and then I move on to a new thing, but each of those things becomes part of my basket of materials, my warehouse of useless information, from which I get to serve my clients. So I don't feel like I've lost any identity by leaving any of my organizations. I feel like I've gained by moving into the next one.
That's a great way to analyze it, because I do feel like when people park a job or they exit a career, it's kind of like a grievance for them. Grievance of familiarity before they go into something that's a bit more challenging.
And identity. Keep in mind, like, for the majority of human history, you are what you do. You're not who you think you are. You're not the son of your parents. You are who you are what you do. You are the value that you, and even still now, when you meet somebody on the street for the very first time, you ask them, okay, what is your name? Because I need to know what to call you. And secondly, what do you do for work? Why do we ask that? Why is that the second question instead of what are your values, or how many children do you have? We say, what's your name? What do you do? Because that, for all of human history, is who you are. I need to know what value you add to society so I know how to talk to you. If you're a doctor, or a lawyer, or a plumber, an architect, or an artist, if you're a singer or a dancer, I have vocabulary. I can talk to you, but I need that definition, because to us, to the rest of society, you are what you do, not what you intend, not how you feel.
How important is it for you to understand someone's job occupation in order to be able to translate and speak to them?
Very. Yeah, very. People don't end up in their jobs by mistake. They get funneled in by, genetics and socioeconomics and opportunity and, their own curiosities. Yes, now we're living in an era when you can change careers 3 or 4 times during a lifetime, which is great. We have access to so much information, you can do that. But people tend to not just accidentally become what they are. And especially if you recognize that there's so much of your life that goes into what you're doing every day, right? Your job isn't just a job. It's not other than you. It's not all of you, but it's not other than you either, right? It's at least half of you. Anything that you're doing with half of a human life every day should be as meaningful as possible. And so when people say, oh, well, it's not me, it's just a job, I'm like, that's actually not true. If your life is just a collection of experiences between birth and death, fully half of them will be gained at work, right? So that's not other than you. That's at least half of you. So let's explore that. Let's explore why it is that you've ended up where you are. Let's explore why it is that they've chosen you and not someone else. So those questions, helping to add a layer of meaning to what people do every day, I think are compelling questions.
So right now, what gives you meaning in the job that you're doing right now?
Oh, I get to mess with people's lives all the time. It's so fun. It's really fun. So all I do now is I do keynote speaking, I do corporate training, and the most fun that I have is coaching, executive coaching. But yeah, I get to work with some of the most incredible, powerful business leaders in the region. And the reason I get to do that is because I have a warehouse of information that's useful to them. Tactical information, strategic information, like an Olympic coach would have for an Olympic athlete, right? I can talk to them intelligently about things that really matter to them, both on and off the pitch. And so that's usually a voice that most C-suiters don't have in their lives. They might have a counselor or a therapist, but that person doesn't know how to help them at work. And they might have somebody, if they're the CEO of an organization, who do they go to for strategic advice and say, like, hey, I want to bounce this idea off of somebody without letting my CFO know what the idea is and without exposing it to the board of directors? Like, how do you do that as a CEO? Will you do that with a coach? You have to have an Olympic level coach if you've got an Olympic level athlete. And so for me, the most fun that I have now is I get to speak into those lives.
How do you manage to break down these big guys? Because I think sometimes these people get to the positions that they're in because they're very dialed in, focused, stubborn. They have their own roadmap. So how do you break the barrier there?
I listen. I spend a lot of time in the beginning, at least, listening. Yeah, I get asked this a lot. So on my media team loves the fact that there's a number of outlets, Sherman, CIPD, and Forbes, that have said, I'm the UAE's top business coach. Now, I'm going to tell you honestly, I have no idea the criteria by which any of that would be decided, and I'm not everybody's cup of tea, okay? So that's just marketing, as far as I'm concerned. But what it does is it gets me into the rooms of the people who want an executive coach as a hood ornament. Right? I don't want just an executive coach. I want the Bugatti of executive coaches. I want the Teslas. Like, I want the best we can get, and then they end up finding me. And so I get into those offices with, very oftentimes, ego-driven, arrogant people who've gotten to the place where they're at by not being told that they're wrong very often, right? And so then I'm sitting with them, and sometimes they'll say to me, well, look, I don't really have a lot to learn about leadership. Obviously, I mean, look at me, I've got 50,000 employees, I've started this amazing company, and I say, okay, that's fine. Let's just talk. Within 2 or 3 months of sessions, they give me more than enough information. And the advantage that I have going in that they don't know about is that I know what I can do in a year, and they have no idea. And without fail, after we've spent a couple of hours together, I have more than enough to say, hey, listen, would you consider the possibility of a more effective way to lead your people, a way to achieve better discretionary effort and better financial performance? If it would mean a few tweaks to your behavior, would you be willing to do that? Invariably, they'd say yes, because most of them are fairly, greed-oriented, very selfish-oriented.
Persuasive language.
Yeah, but when we start with the premise that all of us are selfish, okay, but the most effective form of selfishness is together on teams, and we recognize that our selfishness is better enacted when we're a better team player. And even at the top level, even at the level of owner or manager or captain of that team, if you're a team player and you're encouraging and you're cheering for your people and you're covering for their mistakes and you're developing them and feeding into them, they're going to behave better when you're not looking, which is like 98% of the time. When they realize that, look, all of their margin is made with discretionary effort, right? In times when your employees are not being managed at all, that's when they start to realize, oh yeah, how am I going to keep an apex predator interested in serving my goals when nobody's watching? Well, yeah, good leadership does that. Empathy does that. Psychological safety does that. Empowerment does that. And I've got tools for that.
Okay, what makes a great CEO then, if you were to just give me a manual right now?
Yeah, look, great CEOs, first of all, they recognize that they'll never cover for their mistakes, right? None of us are prophets, none of us are gods. So those CEOs that continue to work on fixing their mistakes, they do so under the assumption that eventually you could be a god, right? Rather, the good CEOs recognize, okay, I'm really bad at this. So I'm going to hire somebody that's really good at this, that's different than me, and I'm just going to trust them. And that's the awkward part. That's the difficult part. You have to get people around you that are very different than you, and you have to trust them. Okay, that's the only way you can be omni-talented as a leader, is to be in a room of people that are very, very different from each other, and embrace the friction that comes from that conversation, and then trust people whose expertise cover your weaknesses.
How do you build that trust?
No, you extend it first. So I think it was 2005, 2006, I read Speed of Trust by Stephen Covey. So Stephen M.R. Covey he was a guru of mine that's become a friend now. And that book changed my outlook on business. I started to do business without contracts. And even now, I don't have contracts with any of my clients. Because I realized that trust is an accelerant, right? So I start with 100% trust. I'm just going to trust you, and then we're going to see how it goes, and you're just going to trust me, and we're going to see how it goes. I'm going to deliver, then I'm going to invoice, then you're going to pay. That's it. We don't need a contract for that. A contract is only read when the relationship's already broken. And if the relationship's already broken, well, then that's my fault. I'm the coach. Okay, so I'll take responsibility for that. But I have a 100% pay rate because it's my responsibility all of the time to drive enough value that my clients can't possibly consider not paying me. So yeah, I start with trust. And modeling that for my clients means that they learn from not just the theory of what I'm doing, but actually experiencing that themselves. And I say, look, when I came into relationship with you, it was without a contract, without an advance payment. I just started. And they're like, yeah, that's right. I'm like, okay, so when you bring somebody new onto the C-suite, start there and see what happens.
Where does this confidence come from in terms of anything when, say, if we rewind 20 years back, did you have the same level of confidence?
Not in every domain. Confidence is domain specific, right? I stand on stages in front of thousands of people and I can speak. You give me a slide clicker, you give me my slide deck, I'm fine, no problem. Very, very confident, right? Cameras, lights, audience, no problem. But if you take away my slide clicker and you give me a guitar, I'm done. That's it. There's no confidence at all. So you can't change even a little piece of the context in which you're confident. And there's no such thing as a generally confident person, right? That's a lie, right? All confidence is context specific, and it's all based on risk, right? If you're doing something that you've always done, you're not going to gain confidence from it because you've always done it. I don't become a more confident driver by driving on the street. It's normal. I've been doing it for years. But if I take my car to a racetrack, I can become a more confident driver by doing the same thing faster, right? You increase the risk, and if you take risk and you do something that you've never done before and you achieve it, then you gain confidence from that. So my confidence, just like everyone's confidence, is not general. It's domain specific, it's context specific.
So to get onto the book, what motivated you to write this?
All of my books are the product of my irritation with the world. So the same with Spartan CEO and my PhD thesis and business is personal before that. It was like, I just become really irritated with something. I become curious about why somebody hasn't answered this question already, and then so I decided to answer it. But my wife told me I'm not allowed to do any more postgraduate degrees because like I have 2 masters and 2 doctorates, and a 3rd doctorate just looks silly now, right? So she's like, you can't do another doctorate degree. And I was like, okay, well, I'll write a book. So then I started to write books, and that's really fun. But all of my books are that, kind of like the grain of sand that produces the pearl in an oyster. So the grain of sand that from Love at Work was the fact that I read every leadership book I can get my hand on, right? But I'm consistently reading books about empathy in leadership and trust and shared values in organizations and belonging on teams. And I'm reading tons of stuff about, psychological safety, right? But I'm not reading any books about the highest form of any of those things.
Why were you reading those types of books?
Because those are leadership books. Yeah. I'm just interested in new ideas for leadership and management. I distill all of that information for the benefit of my coaching clients. So they don't have to read the books. They just talk to me, and I know the part of that particular theory or that particular methodology or that particular tactic. I've got my own experiences and thousands of other conversations from which to draw. They're not paying for an hour with me. They're paying for the 80,000 hours that came before that, right? So I try to feed that warehouse of knowledge, as much as I possibly can. So reading books about leadership, I started to realize, like, the highest form of psychological safety is love. When we love one another, it's a default to trust, it's a default to empathy, it's a default to shared values, it's a default to belonging. Like, why are we not talking about that at work? If we're talking about all of these other things around it, why are we not talking about the highest form of psychological safety and belonging and shared values and trust and empathy? That didn't seem right to me. So I wrote a book about it because I was irritated. And in that, really wanted to understand why we had kicked love out of the boardroom and out of the executive committee meeting, and why is it that at the end of an executive committee meeting you don't hear anybody standing up and saying, "I love you, Terry, that was a great meeting," right? They'll say, "Oh, I love what you did in there," or "I love those numbers," or "I loved your presentation," but not "I love you, Sophia, I love what you're doing here, I'm so grateful for your contribution to our economic community." Like, we're just not doing that. And yet the profitability of that from a purely greed-based standpoint is immense. Imagine what people will do for their own self-development, for the sake of that, for the sake of that economic tribe, if they were convinced that the leader that they followed loved them back.
Do you have any stats on, like, how love in the workplace enhances like revenue or enhances like people's probability of staying within a company? Do you have any nice stats?
Unfortunately, because of the nature of the book, it has not been very well researched. And that's one of the things that I cover in the book, is that we haven't researched love in the workplace very well. What we do find is that those organizations where employees feel better engaged with the people that are around them, they feel more connected, more supported, those organizations are 21% more profitable, there's 41% less absenteeism, there's 59% less turnover, there's 17% higher performing on average. We're dealing with 1.4 million employee records. This is a Gallup study from, I think 2019 was the date of that study. On top of that, we're also finding that there's an increase in the number of employees who are reporting having a work spouse. So the work spouse phenomenon is super interesting, especially in Western Europe and the United States, where a lot more people, up to 60% in many companies, are reporting to have a work spouse. A work spouse is somebody that they define as somebody who you would be just as transparent with as you would be with your own spouse, even though it's a non-romantic relationship.
Okay, I was just about to ask you that question. Yeah. This is where...
No, this has nothing to do with office romance. No. And I think that's probably also one of the problems. Like, we've conflated the idea of love with sex and romance at work, and that's just not true. Right? On one end of the love spectrum, I love chocolate. I do. I really love chocolate, and I can say I love chocolate and be completely transparent about that. I also love Matt Damon, right? I love Matt Damon. I love all of his movies, even though we've never met, and I don't actually know how we would carry on a conversation, but I love Matt Damon, right? We say that. That's appropriate. And on the other side, I love my kids. I love my children. I will die for them. I will sacrifice for them, and I will encourage and nurture them for the remainder of our lives, right? And so on the chocolate end of the spectrum, we've got one thing, and on the child end of the spectrum, we've got another, and neither of the ends of that spectrum have anything to do with sex or romance, and yet love covers all of that. Sex and romance are a detour somewhere along the way, but because of this little detour and because of the possibility that you might have to define what love means when you say, "Hey, I love you" in the office, we've run away from the word.
The risk.
Yeah, we've run away from the word, and I think in doing so, we've sacrificed on that efficiency that we could gain. Like, it's only in a loving relationship where even two executives, okay, if the two executives, and don't get me wrong, almost everybody I've talked to has said, look, I've worked with somebody that I would say, I love that person, even though it's not romantic or sexual in any way. I would have just never told them so out loud. Everybody has that. Okay, so if you take two executives who have that kind of loving relationship, even if they're not saying it out loud, that kind of belonging and trust and respect allows one of them to say to the other one, hey, Tim, you're being a jerk. Stop that. You're undermining all of us. If you just like breathe for a second, you realize this is not going in your favor. You're hurting your own career. Then Tim says, yeah, you might be right. But it's only in the context of a loving relationship that the highest level of critical feedback can be heard, because there's the highest level of trust is there. You know that the person sitting across from you isn't trying to hurt you. They're not trying to hurt you. They love you. So if they're saying something hard to you, you might, listen. You might improve the quality of your own life by doing that. But we don't nurture that quality of relationship in the organization because we try to hold each other at bay, manufacturing what we call professional distance, right? Professional distance, I think, is what we've manufactured to keep love out of the workplace. And in doing so, we've sacrificed on all of those efficiencies that we could be gaining.
How do we break the barrier of entry point to display love in the workplace?
It's a really good question. I get asked that a lot. So for me, when I was doing the research on the book, this was, I don't know, more than a year ago now, on one day, I was doing research, writing, and I was thinking through how to implement this. And I decided, I just made a switch decision in my head that I was going to sign off every email that I write to anyone ever, love Corrie. No more sincerely or best wishes, no more warm regards, none of that, right? So just that, then and there, every email since then, love Corrie, love Corrie, love Corrie. Nobody has reported me to the HR department. And I have worked in hundreds of companies over that period of time. I have told CHROs, CEOs, boards of directors, I have told chairman of the board, I love you, in email, no response, nothing questioning it, nothing at all. It's just completely sincere. And now I wonder what might happen if more people start, like if 1 million people or 10 million people started just signing all their emails off with love. I wonder if that might change something.
Do you think, though, obviously you've built your career massively now at this stage, that do you think if it was Corrie back when he was 18 and he was saying, Corrie, how would that be digested?
Actually, I think quite well. Remember, I was raised in a very loving home.
Yeah.
I was raised in a really traditional Christian home.
But to a vice chairman of a company.
Yeah, I don't know. I could imagine it, but I wouldn't have had the confidence and context at that point to say it. Yeah.
Yeah, they might look at Corrie being like, this dude.
But now, I'm the UAE's top business coach. I can say whatever I want. You know, I can sign off all my emails with love. Nobody's going to report me. It's not going to end up in the news. But the fascinating thing is that it hasn't triggered that kind of negative response. Nobody has replied to my email saying, well, what do you mean by that? Not one.
So the Middle East, because the Middle East is a bit different, I would say, to Europe. How have you found the difference in between displaying love in the Middle East over Europe?
Look, we're all human at the end of the day, and the rules by which I do leadership and management are old rules. I'm an evolutionary psychologist, and I deal with neuroscience and neuroplasticity. So my disciplines are all very much culture non-specific, culture agnostic. And I find that people here are looking for love and belonging and trust and empathy just the same as people in the West or in North America. I find that the language varies slightly, but not by much, not by enough to matter. And I actually find that the discussion about love in the workplace is more readily accepted here than it is in the West because we're less individualistic here. Western Europe is very individualistic. North America is very individualistic. We're much more collectivist here, and as we reach into East Asia, it becomes even more collectivist. So I find that the idea that we're a we and not an I lands and resonates a lot quicker. So when I just tell people in an auditorium of 1,000 employees that I love them, they believe me.
Aside of emails. Aside of emails and saying I love you, have you ever gotten in trouble in person?
I can't say that I have.
Or discomfort. Have you? How do you bear the discomfort of someone else? Because I would imagine people that don't hear this often, they must feel a little bit uncomfortable.
That's correct. Yeah, usually, and they'll think, well, again, they'll think, what do you mean by that, right? But I'm taking back the word. I've decided that there is so much efficiency to be gained. There is so much collaborative potential to be gained. There's so much innovative potential to be gained that it's worthwhile riding out the awkward storm. And so I just say it, and I also mean it. Yeah, my default is to want to improve the quality of your life as much as I possibly can. Whether I'm with you for 2 months, 2 years, 20 years, doesn't matter. For as long as I'm in relationship with you, Sophia, my job is to improve the quality of your life as much as I can. When that stops, then you'll move on. But that was true before I said it. In the meantime, let's just call it love.
So, aside of a career, what's your main purpose in life?
To improve the quality of 1 million lives a month.
A million lives?
1 million lives a month, yeah. That's sort of like, it's a hook that I've been dragging myself around with for about 3 years now. One of my friends over breakfast asked me what my BHAG, my big, hairy, audacious goal is for myself. And it's to improve the quality of 1 million lives every month. I don't have great metrics for that. I'm not going to lie about that. But as long as I keep aiming for that, then I think that what I'm going to be doing today is going to be very valuable.
And is there any kind of other life goals that you'd like to achieve aside of that?
Yes, but my bucket list is growing shorter and shorter.
Yeah?
I've achieved, look, I've already lived 4 lives.
Yeah.
I've told my kids, my wife, my family, everybody, like if God forbid I get hit by a bus tomorrow, don't grieve me.
Yeah.
I have lived way more than my share. I've had a very, very rich life until now. And there are still things that I want to do, but nothing, there's no way I would, with 12, if I was suddenly given 12 hours to live, there's no way I would spend any of that moment in regret. I don't have any regrets. I have memories, and that's it. But as far as the things that I want to do, there are books that I still want to write. There are courses that I want to produce. There are lives that I'd like to help change. And many of those lives are the CXOs of our large organizations. In doing so, if I can help our CXOs to become maybe a little bit more loving, a little more empathetic, a little clearer in their communication, and strategically so, they perform better and the organization does better, but also they incrementally improve the quality of every life in that organization. All culture change organizationally starts at the top. So if I can get in and help them, if they're part of the 1 million lives that I'm improving the quality of every month, then there's a knock-on effect for that. And I am so grateful that I've been welcomed into an industry where I can have that kind of leverage.
How does your wife support all the 1,000,001 tasks that you're doing now? And because I can imagine you're a busy guy.
She's very good at smiling and nodding. But no, she's very, very supportive. I think on my second marriage, my wife and I now have been together for 6 years. Within a year and a half, she started and completed an MBA, and then 6 months later, she had published her own book. And that's just the result of kind of spending a lot of time next to me. You just can't do that and not be motivated. So she's not surprised anymore. She's like, okay, I understand your pace. You're fast. But I work hard, but I also play hard. And my wife and I, we take, 8 weeks of vacation every year. I might take 10 weeks of actual time off. But for me, time off is with my laptop. It's reading, it's writing, it's developing myself, it's education. I think the worst case scenario for me is to spend more than 6 hours on a beach with a book in my hands. I just can't imagine a worse, except maybe kindergarten. I can imagine being a kindergarten teacher being much worse than that. But yeah, I don't rest well. I rest strategically. Yeah. I sleep because I need it. I know exactly how much sleep I need in order to recover. I know my recovery cycle very well. But for me, sleep is a sacrifice. And for my wife, she sleeps a little bit more than me. But in terms of her being able to keep up with my pace, she has no problem. She's also very, very highly focused.
What has been the best episode of your life so far now? Because I feel like you've lived 4 lives. So
yeah.
Out of the 4, what's been the best?
I'm the one I'm living now. I think the present. I try not to live too much in the past or in the future, because those moments either haven't come yet or can't be changed. And this is the moment that I can change. This is the one I can steer. So this is the best. And it's really nice to be in a position where I am doing only things that I love, and I'm working only with people whose company I enjoy, and I'm only working with companies whose puzzles I think I can solve and lives that I think I can improve the quality of, and that's such a great way to go to sleep every night.
How do you manage to stay in the present? Is there anything on a daily basis that will shift your focus to stay present?
Yeah, mindfulness really helps. again, having my task lists and everything digitized so I can get rid of those distractions. All of the notifications on my phone are off. My phone never rings. Unless it's my wife, my kids, or my business manager, Simone, my phone never rings ever. And I teach that to executives because a lot of them are very overwhelmed these days with the amount of interactions they have. But that's how I stay in the present. I eliminate distractions, I eliminate notifications, I eliminate interruptions, and that allows me to drop into flow several times a day.
That's amazing. Have you ever found yourself trying to hang on to other things to distract yourself, to dial in and focus? Like some
Sometimes.
people with ADHD, often they have like it's food, they binge on food, it's drugs, alcohol, or any of these things. Have you ever slid down that rabbit hole before?
No, I don't think, not as a matter of hobby, no. No, as a play hard, yes, but as a matter of hobby, no. So for me, the distraction is really just the number of things that I wish I could do that I can't do. And the peace of mind that I get is from being able to dump all those things down onto a list of, well, it's literally called my dump list. It's on a Kanban board, it's called dump, and every idea that I have, good, bad, otherwise, any book I want to, any gift I want to buy for my wife, things I want to do on the weekend, whatever, everything goes onto the dump list. And I sort it out a couple of times a day, eliminate things, move things here, move things there. After 60 days, if something's still on my dump list and I haven't scheduled time for it, or moved it into a list, or moved it onto my urgent task list, then it gets immediately removed. It goes into an archive list. And the archive list has to exist, because if it was deleted, the little angry caveman that lives on top of my amygdala would just freak out. Like, that's an opportunity, you can't miss that, right? That's a threat, you have to mitigate that. And it occurred to me at some point, so I stewarded the information. So if I delete the information, then my caveman freaks out. But if it moves onto an archive list, that archive list has hundreds of good intentions on it. And that's where they live, and that's most of the time where they die, these great intentions. And that allows me to absorb every distraction, steward every distraction, but not focus on them. I think that's been a really good best practice for me.
So to finish this podcast, I have one last question, because it's called the Detached Podcast. What would you detach yourself away from?
What would I detach myself away from?
That's enabling you to be your true potential self. Is there anything that gets in the way?
No. I think I've detached myself from those things. I'm looking through old narratives and traumas, and they're not there anymore. I can't think of a thing that I would detach myself from. I've curated the people in my life. I've curated the information that I interact with. I've curated the information that I output. I've curated my expectations of myself, and I think that's it. Maybe burgers and pizza.
I was just going to say food. There must be something.
So this is the thing, but I actually wouldn't. I love high calorie dense foods. I love burgers and pizza, and I love beer on the weekends. And so I train hard to try to compensate for that, but I will never have abs. That is not my goal. My goal is to work out my goal is to be fit enough that I'm the kind of person that you would want to talk to in an apocalypse. So like when the zombies come and the aliens are taking over, come find me. I'm smart, I can lift heavy, I can run forever. And I do that with, by I eat pizza on the weekends, and I eat burgers during the week, and I out-train it. I try anyway.
Well, with that being said, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, Sophia.
Thank you.